I'm gonna print out a copy of the agenda for myself. Could somebody do a count and figure out if we have quorum yet?
Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of us. So yes, we do.
I have,
Me,
sorry, I'm late.
No, perfect.
Douglas, you.
1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and myself, 5. Yep.
You're the most important, Sharon.
Well, before I call the meeting to order, I want to share a personal. I'm a little bit scattered. My husband had a motorcycle accident on Sunday.
Oh
So
no.
I'm kind of running a little ragged, trying to take care of everything. So I'm not prepared for this. Of course, there could be a million reasons why I didn't prepare as much as I'd like to, but I have a good excuse this time.
Well, hopefully it wasn't too serious.
It wasn't too serious. He is back home already. The staff at Leahy said he might have set a record for being discharged the soonest after a motorcycle accident.
Still pretty scary to have that kind of thing happen.
It is.
Yeah, definitely.
And Karen, thank you for doing the minutes, which I also want to print to refer to. I know I saw them, I just read them, but now I have to find them again. Was it today or yesterday? It was today, right?
Yesterday, I think she sent them out. I think.
Sent them yesterday, sorry. Yeah, yesterday.
Oh,
And I know I had couple of small corrections, and I sent them to Karen.
let's officially call the meeting to order at 6:03. Okay, carry on, Janet. So we'll
I sent a couple of small corrections to Karen, and maybe she could tell everybody what they were, because I honestly don't remember.
So Janet, the only one I remember was you corrected me on the date of the conservation coffees, that it's the first Tuesday of each month, not the second.
Okay.
And so I have made that change to the minutes.
Okay. All right. Maybe that was it.
And I did not hear back from anyone else. So
I have just read them in the past few minutes, and I do not see anything any corrections to be made. So it sounds like at least 2 of us have reviewed them. Can I hear a motion to accept that?
We'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, next thing I put on the agenda is
You need to ask us for if we no
For the
for a
vote.
oh, sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes to accept the August minutes as amended. And I thought, while we have whoever we have here, we could get a couple of dates for October. We had a tradition of meeting on the third Thursdays. It would be nice to have a regular meeting time that we could plan around, if that works for folks. The third Thursday in October would be the 20th.
Works for me.
Works for me.
Okay, so Janet,
Let's go.
Jerry,
Yeah, works for me.
Doug,
Just a minute, I'm pulling up my calendar.
Michael.
I'm doing the same.
Okay,
Chances are very good that it's fine, but let me just check.
while you're doing that, I'm gonna get my printout.
I just pulled it out anyway.
Okay, so Doug,
I think it's looking good, but let me look in one other place.
Michael,
I'm all set with that. I actually still have the 7 o'clock meeting on there that Amanda had sent out. Should I just delete that entire series?
well, hopefully we can honor it. But I think I spoke to Laurie in the town manager's office, town clerk's office, and she said that she was going to delete those and wait for us to
Okay.
tell
So
her.
I do kind of like the 6 o'clock. I don't know if everybody concurs with that, but it makes the night not go quite so late.
I have that meeting in there because it was a part of, this is October 20th, right?
Mhm.
That I had the meeting scheduled in there. That's the only thing so I'm good.
Okay, all right. So I heard one proposal to stick with 6. For me, it's a little early. I could manage it. I'd prefer 6:30. Anybody else want to comment?
Yeah, I prefer it on the later side. So, I actually prefer 7, but if 6:30 is a compromise, that's fine by me.
Anybody else have an opinion?
I like the later time, but I'll do 6:30.
Well, why don't we try 6:30 and then we can revisit again as we proceed. Sounds like we're about, I know that Haney, he was not available until 7 tonight, so that does make a stronger argument to stick with 7. Michael, can you do 7? You just have a preference to meet earlier?
Yeah. I mean, I can, if there's a strong consensus to stick with 7, then, I can do that. I work in the office. It's just easier if I stay here and, don't go home and get caught up with the kids and the family and but
Yeah,
it's a personal preference. So 7's fine if there's much more interest in keeping it there. I'm fine with that.
so Haney, we're talking about October meeting, October 20th, the third Thursday at 7. Do you know if you're available?
October 20th or September. So this is our September meeting, right?
Right.
October 20th. Seems like a century from now. I think it's
I
okay.
know.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, usually for me, 6:30 is sort of the borderline, right? So 6:30 works, but 7 is better as usual for me but if it is 6:30, let's give it a shot, Let's see what we can do.
We only had one strong voice for 6:30, so he's willing to. There's the majority would prefer 7, so I think we'll stick with 7.
Better for me.
And
October 20th is good.
and I propose that we plan to meet by Zoom. My own personal travel plans are up in the air right now. I'm not sure if I'll be able to meet in person if we decide to do that. So plan on that. Good news. Who has some good news they want to share?
Only
I
somewhat
could share some.
personal. I mean, it's not exactly personal, but River, the EV project that the CMLP was sponsoring for condominiums, Riverwalk finally today got the electrical plans to actually accomplish it. And it's more personal than public, but it's the pilot project for installing EV charging in multi-unit dwellings.
Cool. And Matt, I think you were going to say something.
Well, I don't know if there's going to be more discussion later tonight, but there, of course, Concord was selected among these one of the 10 communities for a pilot project as part of the statewide bill for sustainability and climate change legislation to have the fossil-free infrastructure initiative. So we now are looking to see how we can get ourselves started on that. And so the town manager has written a letter, saying, hey, we want to be part of this. We've already voted at town meeting on it, but there are some differences between the state legislation and our bylaws. So there's some possibility that we may need to create a new warrant article. There aren't rules and regs yet for the program. So we don't know yet when or how we will be able to start, but it does look like we have qualified, and it's really a breakthrough, I think.
Great.
So Matt, I have a question there. You described it as that we've been selected.
Well,
It's
it's not us specifically. It says 10 towns, but of course
Yes.
there are 10 towns that have already passed such initiatives. And, there have been back and forth discussions with Senator Barrett, who drafted the legislation, who more or less said those 10 towns are the 10 towns.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I was asking for clarification was that it seemed like just yesterday, but it was, I think, sometime last week, perhaps, that Kerry sent a letter to the state saying, we want to be one of those towns. We're
Yes.
signing up. And I just, the way you described it, I thought we'd heard back already, but it sounds like we have not yet heard back. But the way everything is set up is we should be one of those towns.
Yeah, and so we're going through all of the motions that we hope are necessary to make that list. So I think that it is much as we can know about whether we've qualified, we are in good shape, let's just say.
Yeah, that's my perspective too.
I just wanted to say that maybe people know this already, but Mayor Wu decided that Boston should be one of the cities involved. And so she may usurp one of the 10. I don't know.
Well, it's a question of whether it's up to her. But secondly, I would have to say, as a citizen of the world, if Concord had to step aside for Boston to be able to go fossil fuel free, I would take that trade, frankly. But, let's see where it goes.
So
Doug?
Matt,
Michael?
yeah, I'm sorry. I was just curious what you had mentioned that the main benefit would be free infrastructure.
Like fossil free, fossil fuel free. So in other words, new buildings would not have gas hookups. They would
for new construction.
new construction. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Right.
Or substantial reconstruction. I think it's 50% or more reconstruction.
Yeah.
Of the building. Yeah.
Got it. Makes sense. Thank you.
Doug, do you have anything to share?
And also, I just wanted to say, have you? Jerry got a copy of the memo that was created by Chris Carmody that sort of talked about the state of play, and I didn't know, Jeremy, if you wanted to forward that to CSEC members.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, thanks.
I'll do that now.
It's a week old. That seems like forever in the speed that things have been developing, but I think it's still mostly current.
State of play, what? I'm sorry. I got lost there.
Well, especially in the first few days, there was a flurry of questions about, for example, qualifying under the affordable housing requirements. Where there was back and forth with Senator Barrett, and there were questions with the Attorney General's office and all of that. So, and whether there were regulations and whether we needed to file new, town meeting warrants, that kind of thing. And I mean, what we learned was not everything is known yet, but that there was a lot of discussion in those first few days after the legislation was.
Is there anything else we should know about that, Matt?
That's about all I know about it. Like I say, if Jerry forwards that memo, I think it goes into greater detail.
Yeah, I just forwarded the email with the memo as an attachment.
But I do feel like it's very good news, first of all, to have the federal legislation, then to have the state legislation, and now to have Concord, potentially being able to take the most aggressive initiative among all of them.
Is there anything we need to do or that you would like us to do in this?
Not yet. Not yet. There may be more to come. We'll see. Okay,
if that's it for good news, the chair's update, but I want to lean on Jerry here. You were going to talk, I think one of our big points is the sustainability director opening. And have you anything to report there?
A little bit, not a lot. Matt, you probably have more than I do, but so a search is underway. I believe we have 17 candidates. I electronically spoke with Carrie and offered to assist with the interviewing, and she said, great. I think that starts next week, but I don't have an update on that. So that's what I know. I don't know, Matt, if you have anything additional.
I have no information, actually. No.
Okay.
I haven't been in the loop on that hire.
And actually, kind of on a related note, so this email from Carrie that I just forwarded with the memo to the state saying Concord, signing up to be one of these 10. I don't know quite how this all occurred, but the town got this out without a sustainability director in place. In other words, so someone, whether it was the town manager or the assistant town manager or somebody in the administration, got on it and made it happen. And I was really pleased to see that.
Well, the wheels were turning. I mean, the wheels of legislation turn very slowly. Let's put it that way. And so
right.
All of that had been set into motion some time ago, and it just came to fruition finally.
Well,
and I have to say, Senator Barrett did work very hard on this too.
Right, but in this case, I'm referring to Concord staying on the ball and not letting this fall into a hole, despite the fact we don't have a sustainability director on board. So those things happen, but they didn't happen here. So
yeah,
a little bit of good news. I just want to give.
And then Jerry, I wanted to suggest that you forward not just the letter from the town manager, but the memo that I forwarded to you and Courtney that Chris wrote that describes the status.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let me look for that.
Yeah.
So then, should we move on? Michael?
Sharon, just you had given me a bit of a window to to speak up about 5 minutes ago. If I could just follow through on that.
Please.
So we do have, as you noted on your agenda, a speaker tonight from National Grid, who is in charge of National Grid's Future of Heat program. And as part of that, the DPU and the DPU has given National Grid some financing and some leeway to look for a host community to conduct a geothermal pilot study. And so that's what Owen will be speaking about tonight. Of course, there are a lot of details that go along with that. But given the type of community that Concord is, and particularly with the news that Matt brought us tonight, I just thought it might be something people would be interested in hearing. So that's what that little segment will be about once Owen comes on.
Okay. Upcoming events. I know coming right on us very soon is Ag Day. And Karen, you were going to reach out to them, and I saw you send an email to the group. Has anybody responded? Do we have someone to cover the?
No, I have changed my plans and I'll be in town, but I have another commitment from 12 to 2. So I could only do the morning from 10 to 12 if someone else could cover the afternoon from 12 to 2. But they did they did give us a table at Ag Day to set up for CSAC.
And do we know where the materials are physically, that you can pick up the box that Amanda had? Jerry, do you know where the materials are?
I do not. Someone, maybe it was Amanda, told me it was put in some obvious place, but I don't know what that obvious place is.
Could it be that it was in her old office area?
It could be,
Front?
it could be, but I don't know that.
There's not a lot of time between now and then. We do have a list of people that have volunteered to do things. We had a member of the public here last month that said, let me know if I can help. So we could reach out to him. That was Eric, who I believe is a neighbor of yours, Michael. Is that correct? Eric Reinhardt?
No, he's not.
He's not a neighbor of yours?
No, you gave me his name. I didn't know who he was until you gave me his name, and then I just emailed him.
Oh, okay. But is anybody willing to take on the task of either volunteering or finding a volunteer? I can send you a list of names and phone numbers of people that have said, call me at some point.
What's
This
the
is-
Ag Day date?
Say again, Doug?
And
The date?
It's this Saturday, September 10th.
Yeah, I'm fully booked this
Yeah.
week and this weekend, so I unfortunately can't help out on this.
Yeah, I cannot do it either. I also have a commitment.
similar commitment.
Ditto, fortunately.
I could just
Oh,
pack
you're
up
ready to
after the
jump
first 2 hours. And I could just go for the first 2 hours and then just pack out.
Yeah, that would be better than not at all. That would be wonderful if you're able to do that.
So the materials, if they're stored on Church Street, Matt, is there someone that Karen could check with to see if they could point her to the materials?
I
Or just someone
think
to
that,
check with there?
I think that the secretary, doesn't the town manager, that's where her office is too, right?
No,
Not on Church Street, no. I mean, the assistant town manager's office used to be there. I don't think it is anymore. But there are, town staff that work there. It's really the community services office for the most part. So, and they are open during the regular working hours. So, I mean, maybe something could be worked out. Yeah.
So
And
Karen,
I'm-
Get away from work to get over there and see.
I mean,
Let's-
it's walking distance from my house. So I don't know. Maybe I should grab this stuff.
I was going to say, I could probably go there on Friday to see if I can find them. I don't know, seems strange to just walk in the door and say, I'm looking for these, and they don't know who I am. But-
Everybody knows who you are, Janet.
I don't think so. But I can try, but um,
He
and
also
then,
might,
since I live next door to Karen, I can easily get the box to Karen.
You know, it's not a strange thing to have people walk into that building. I mean, they've had recreation classes in upstairs there in the past and stuff. So yeah, I don't think they're
Right. Well, when we had the electric vehicle event in the sustainability series, I collected the box of materials for that. And Amanda had left those, basically she left them in the hallway. But I don't think they'll be there, but they could be in the basement area, or it could be in her old office. I don't know, but I
kind of
can,
a big facility.
not that big, but
Right.
I'll see what I can do.
they used to have the posters that they used for the trees down in the basement there too.
In the meeting room in the basement. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Karen, could you remind us where would the table be set up on Saturday?
I don't know exactly, somewhere down on Main Street in downtown Concord. And as far as I can tell, I'm supposed to bring a table, so I will try and find something that I can bring.
Do you have something, or do you
I
need,
don't know.
does anyone can offer the
I
table?
might be able to find a card table though, or something light that I can lift by myself.
I have a 4-foot table, which is slightly bigger than a card table.
Okay, that would be
Right.
great. Thank you.
Okay.
So if Janet can find the box of materials, she will give it to Karen, and Karen will do that from 10 to 2. And if anybody
10 to 12.
schedule frees up, then and can meet Karen before noon and trade off, that would be wonderful. And if not, thank you for what you're doing, and it's at least we're doing something. Other
Down there, I think the select board's gonna have a table as well. I'll be down there at least part of the time.
Are you volunteering to staff the table for?
Well, I guess
we
I'll
leave
look
Karen?
around. It would be better, of course, to have CSEC members who really know what's going on staffing it, but yeah.
Okay. So anybody else know of any events in the next month or before the end of October that we should, or actually just know of any events period that we should put on our planning calendar?
There's West Concord Day in October, and I'm trying to remember what date it is. I'm I don't know whether I can find it or not. I mean, if I put it in my calendar.
Right, and I don't think I have, so we went through a list of organizations we could think of last month, and people volunteered for various ones. So I think Haney and Michael were not at the meeting, or not. So we still have, we have a few that we didn't identify anybody to volunteer yet. So, but the West Concord Day people, I don't think are, I mean, I know they're not on my list unless they go by some other name.
Yeah, the Discover West Concord Day is October 15th.
Right,
And it's
Right.
also Porch Fest. Yeah.
and it's also the Reuse It. I'm planning to have the Reuse It that day.
Yeah.
A busy day.
Reuse
October
it, meaning drop off.
And that's another place where CSAC has tabled in the past, which will be much better than Discover West Concord, because so many people come.
Sorry,
And it's thematically closer in a way.
That's true.
The reuse it, which is
Yeah.
also on October 15th.
Yes, I just got an email from Fred Sard a couple of days ago about that.
Well, yeah, it sounds like we should make a the first priority, staffing a table for for reuse it. And if we have enough volunteers, then also have somebody at West Concord Day. So where's the reuse it event taking place?
At the CPW, Kais Road.
Okay. And do you know the timing?
It's mostly all day, not entirely, but
It's like
I-
9 to 3 or something like
yeah,
that.
it's something like 9 to 3.
So can somebody volunteer to get the materials from Karen and set up a table on the morning of October 15th?
So actually, I have a question for Janet. I don't recall seeing a CSEC table there at any time. I usually go pretty much every year.
I certainly remember seeing them pre-COVID. I mean, it's been there once, maybe twice since I've been on CSAC.
Where was the table?
That's-
It was somewhere near the entrance, so, they have a sort of registration table where people, volunteers pick up that, identifying bibs and, record their presence, etc. I think it was somewhere near there. I think, Kate Hanley organized us to do it at least once.
Is this the drop-off, swap-off day?
Yeah,
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, I was there.
I
I
was
I
there.
tabled, I think Karen and I tabled there, whenever it was, might have been, must have been pre-COVID.
Yes, and we were signing folks up for the home models.
For home energy audits, which I do think is an excellent opportunity to get people's name and number and offer, something that we can offer them. Okay, I didn't hear anybody volunteer to start October 15th, and somebody volunteer to find volunteers
For which day you're talking about?
for October 15th.
I'll be there for a couple of hours. I can do that and do something else for the drop off.
Did you say is that called the reuse it day? Is that?
Yes,
That's the swap, the drop and swap thing?
exactly. Yep.
And so I will answer Jerry's question now. We were in the swap off area because that's where people were.
okay. That makes more sense to me.
The only
Is there-
sort of downside is that you actually get a lot of people that are not Concord residents. And it's the downside because if you're trying to offer them a energy audit and they're not,
Yeah.
But we can still pass their name on to, National Grid if they're a
Yeah.
grid customer.
And the drop off is only open to Concord residents. So
Right, but there's people that are
have the
going to,
table.
yes, the swap off part. People are collecting.
I mean, people come up from all over to pick up stuff. That's true.
Right, which is fine, it's fine. It just that means that some of the people that you talk to, then they're like, oh, well, I don't live in Concord, so that doesn't make sense for me to say. But okay, anybody know any other events we need to be planning for? Cheryl, are you trying to say something? I know you're not officially a member, but if you want to say something.
I was just going to say, I always go to the drop off and swap off, and I certainly am happy to continue and work there and do whatever you guys want me to do. It sounds great. Thanks.
Excellent. I will pass your contact information on to Janet. Okay. Okay, I'll assume that's a yes. Any other events on the planning horizon that we're aware of?
One of the ones that I am not sure about, but I'm sort of on the outlook for is something that has to do with the Concord Public Library and their planning.
Okay, well, yeah, so get in touch with them. So we have a list of, yeah, so you are tagged as, I'll just go through the entire list. So Ag Committee, Karen, Concord Academy, Doug, Concord Bikes, Janet, Concord Clean Comfort, Jerry, Concord Drives Electric, Janet. Concord Family Network is currently, we don't have anybody identified as working with that group. So think about that. Concord Can, I'm sure a lot of us are somewhat interested. We don't have anybody particular identified as working with Concord Can. First Parish Environmental Team. Library, Doug. Green Team at the high school, Jerry. I'm not sure, Jerry, is that high school specific or is that all schools?
Good question. I think it's all schools, not so much the green team per se, but the CPS sustainability committee. I think that's for, and it encompasses both CPS and CCHS.
Okay. All right, so I'll just put Mothers Out Front, Janet, Pollinator Committee, Janet, League of Women Voters, Janet. You're very popular again.
You know, I think I could
Very
drop out of Mothers Out Front and add Concord Can because somebody asked me to join the Concord Can committee.
Aha. Okay. The Sunrise Movement and so the openings that we are looking to have a liaison with are the Concord Family Network, First Parish, League of Women Voters, and the Sunrise Movement. I have the engineering division, but I think they were just on here as a resource, not as somebody to volunteer with. Although, does anybody have a different opinion on that? Is there a reason we need to liaison with the engineering division? We do have natural resources as Janet and public works as myself.
Well, the engineering department, is that in relationship to the planning that's happening at Alcott School for the review of their boilers?
I don't know. But I could put your name next to it.
No.
All right. So
Do you know if is that the reason it's on the list? Because of,
no, I think it was the list that I have at the moment, and there's more lists that need to be like coordinated. But the list that I'm working from at the moment was for a particular event. And I think the engineering division was on there because they were providing tables. So I'm not sure that it really makes sense to have them on there.
the Concord Engineering Division?
Town of Concord Engineering Division.
I think if it was related to a project, it would be a little easier. It's kind of vague and obtuse to just talk to them in general terms.
Well, so that is what we want to talk about, is are they having, and that's why I'm not sure the engineering division makes sense. But are they having any events that we could table at if we can find people that are available to table? Anything we can help them with, they can help us with.
Okay.
So they were on the list for doing something related to the
Hey,
fair
Sharon?
last week.
Is the First Parish the church that Brad had brought up to the email to you and I just before this started?
Yes.
Why don't you put me on that then, if you're still looking for a volunteer, because it sounds like there might be some overlap with what we'll be talking about tonight with the geothermal.
All right. And so still have the Concord Family with the League of Women Voters and the Sunrise Movement and the Concord Family Network. But I think the Sunrise Movement and the League of Women Voters are more natural fits for having.
Yeah,
working
well,
together.
I said, no, if you put me down for League of Women Voters, I'm a member of the league. I know Janet Rothrock and
I'll
we have
keep you there
an
then.
environmental team there. So I know, I think Alice Kaufman and Janet Rothrock head up that committee. So I have the right contacts.
Perfect. So Sunrise Movement, Amy, yeah, we don't have your name on anything yet.
Sure, put me in, yeah.
Okay. All right. So now we at least have somebody associated. So I will send, Haney, I will send you an email with what I have for contact. Do you already have contacts? with
I
the
don't.
Sunrise?
No.
Okay. I'll send you what I have. I don't know. I don't think I know them
I'll give
personally.
it a shot. Okay.
And as far as First Parish, Michael, Brad is going to be a fine contact. I might have a couple other names.
Yeah, and he's leaving tomorrow for a month, so if you have something and you can send it over.
Yep. All right. So I'll see if I have other names here. And send that to you. Okay.
Does the list also include the Chamber of Commerce, the business community?
No, that is an excellent point, and I'll put you down for it.
I was just asking a question.
All right, you signed up. No.
I'm okay with it. We've done some work already earlier in the year, so it's fine with me.
Yep. When you get it, so you could return the favor, send me the contact information for whoever you have there. So I'll just have it on my list. And that's great, because this is one of the things I was trying to, and I'm glad somebody brought up West Concord Day. Just trying to think of any other events that we know of. The cheese parade came to mind. Sense the table at the cheese parade, but that's a possibility in December.
And Sharon, just how I'm just curious how Alcott School was brought up a few minutes ago. These various projects that have been brought up in the past. I know the Newbury Court was interested in looking at VRFs or progressing their sustainability vision a little bit. Are there plans to follow up with that, or are we just going to let those unfold and get involved at a convenient point?
Can anybody speak to that? Jerry?
I can speak a little bit to that. I can, at least with regard to Alcott. So the current status there is the school has put out an RFP for a study, as we talked about here several months ago when the superintendent presented. It's my intention to follow up with them to find out how will the various RFP submissions be judged? How will they be analyzed? How will a decision be made? And I'm intending, and we'll see if I'm successful, to get involved in that process, as the CSEC representative. Now, I was included in one of the sustainability committee's meetings just before the end of the school year, and I think they're due to start up again this month. But in any case, my intent is to be participate in that committee as a representative of CSEC. So there, hopefully that'll at least keep us better informed at a minimum, although my hope is that we can get more deeply involved than just being informed. As far as Newbury Court or any of the others, I don't have any information on those.
Yeah. And Jerry, I think the RFP may be out on the streets already for Alcott.
Yeah, it is.
It is, yeah. Okay.
I went out, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd have to check the date to see when responses are requested.
Mm-hmm.
I know that off the top of my head.
Okay. Another potential upcoming event that we talked about last month is learning more about the IRA and the Massachusetts law, and then presenting that information in some kind of forum to the residents of the town. Jerry, you're going to see if you could get a speaker that
Yeah.
is more
So
informative.
I have sort of mixed results on that. I did check with someone at MCAN that would be great for this. He declined. There's too much stuff on his plate. That's Logan. Oh, I forget Logan's last name, but
I think.
he's now the interim executive director of MCAN. However, I was pointed to a presentation given by the Green Energy Consumers Alliance on exactly this topic. And I was told it's excellent. I did a quick look through of it and it sure looks great. There's also a YouTube video of it. So I'll send that information around. I just got that this morning. So I'm not sure what we do with it. You know, this was presented online as a webinar. I don't know if a Green Energy Consumer Alliance person would be willing to come to Concord to present again, or if they would refer us back to what they've already done. But at a minimum, this looks to be a good summary. It's lengthy because there's so much, but it looks to be a pretty good summary of at least what's in the IRA. I don't think it addresses directly the Massachusetts specifics or the recent Massachusetts legislation, but it does go into quite a bit of detail on the IRA in summary form, but there's so much in it that it becomes a fairly lengthy thing.
Bob Shatton was on the board of the Green Energy Consumer Alliance, I believe. So he probably has some good contact people who might help out and give a presentation.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I can check with them.
Okay, good, thanks.
And do you know if he's still on the board or if this was?
I don't know whether, I mean, since he's not in the country,
Right,
I don't know whether he's still on the board, but he'd still know people.
right. He still know people. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll check with him.
Guess we don't really know what we want to do with that. I kind of feel like we should do something. You know, the heat pump forums that we had last year were pretty well attended, even though they were on Zoom. But I do think that you get a bigger draw if you have people live presentation. You know, it's like, oh, we're gonna get together and watch this video. It's kind of like, well, I could do that on my own, but then of course you don't. It's easy,
Right.
easy not to.
Well, I think you've pointed out, you know, we don't know, or at least we haven't figured out exactly what it is we want to do here. You know, for example, the material that was presented, it's not immediately obvious how individuals are affected by a lot of it. You know, for example, they go into how much money is allocated in the IRA to this topic and to that topic. And it's very interesting to see, but how that sort of filters down to what we might be doing or what Concord residents would be concerned about action-wise, that's a little unclear to me. But I'll, you know, take a look at this material and see what you think.
So as far as, I'm guessing that most of these things, and you know, the state stuff isn't funded yet, and the federal stuff probably doesn't become available till next year. So we probably still, you know, if we decide next month what we're going to do and try to do it in November, that might be okay.
Yeah, that's kind of my sense, is that there's no immediate urgency. It is important to be timely with this, but if it were November, I don't think there'd be any issues there. In fact, you know, money may be allocated by that point in time. And there may be more information that would be pertinent to Concord residents. I'm not sure, but I think targeting October might be a little aggressive.
Yep. Well, I think, I'm not sure if we have anything else other than our speaker who we're expecting at 7. Do we have anybody have anything else to offer?
I had a question for historical reasons. Did the CMLP ever consider doing what I believe it's Medford, I believe, is doing these power chargers on the poles?
Yeah, I saw that news story.
Yeah.
Annie.
I
I don't,
since we own the poles, I know we share them with Verizon or whatever. Did we ever look at that?
I don't know.
Not that I'm aware of. I did see when I was in Vermont this earlier this year, I think it was in Stowe, that the light poles had like convenience outlets right on them. So if you had your charger with you, you could plug in your 110 charger, which wouldn't get you terribly far, but you know, it could tide you over.
Yeah,
Were these-
I've seen the same video as Hanny, I think. Well, that the chargers are way high up on the poles, and somehow I think you have to have an app to get them to drop down so you can plug it into your car. But I don't really recall how it worked. Do you remember, Hanny?
No, I mean, look, the concept is that you can charge any place where, as opposed to the 2 paltry locations that we have in town, right? Or 3, maybe if you're lucky, and if you're lucky to find a place.
But and it's a 240 volt charger.
The 240 volt, it's a fast charger. It's a
Yeah.
fast charger, and yes, you have to have an app and subscribe, and I think it's a subscription process or something like that, right? I don't think it's a pay as you use. It's more like you have to be some kind of a monthly fee, and then you can use the service, something along those lines.
Pamela, did you want to speak since we have some time?
Yes, please. Pamela Dritt,
So
13
public-
Concord Green. And I was wondering if this committee would be a good source of people to get together, kind of an engineering delegation to go talk to the assisted living, affordable housing new project, to convince them to do all electric heat pump, to put air conditioning in for those residents, because with climate change, we're going to need it. And that organization ought to be doing that for all of its new buildings like that. And if we could send someone to them to say, look, you haven't begun building it yet. If you could save so much money, they're going to be responsible for running it.
What specific organization are you referring to? You said affordable housing and assisted living. Is there a particular
Yeah,
project?
behind the prison. Our new development for senior assisted living.
Is there an agency for that in Concord?
Agency?
No,
Yeah.
is there some overseeing?
I
Was
don't.
there was a town meeting vote to subsidize it. They came back for more money. And I heard
twice.
They were going to come back yet again for more money
Yes.
before they would build it. So I
Yes,
don't know what's going to happen, but Matt may know if he's still here.
Well, I'm here, but I can tell you that, first of all, I can't I participate in the deliberations on this project because I'm near a butter, but that I do understand that there have been proposals to electrify it that so far have not been, agreed to for that project. So
Matt, have there been, who's the person who would have the power to change the design such that they could? Because we need to speak to them, not just the representatives.
well, I
right?
guess the Concord Housing Development Corporation controls the site, but it's a private developer.
Yes.
And I
the
do
private-
believe that, the electrification initiative that we have, the fossil-free infrastructure, does have a exception for
Yes, which
affordable.
is-
Yeah. for
But
better
that's
or worse.
stupid.
Which is unfortunate,
Stupid.
but
That's expensive. It's
Yeah.
stupid.
okay.
The whole,
Pamela, I need to ask you to stop. We all understand your point.
I'm trying to not talk to the local town group. I'm trying to talk to the for-profit developer. They're the ones that need to realize how much money they could save. I mean, it's a win-win financially to them, surely.
Yeah, I think you're preaching to the choir here. But we understand what you're saying.
So should
if-
we do that, or who would do that?
I know the issue's been raised with the developer and I don't know, they haven't been persuaded.
I sort of,
So
I don't think they,
Yeah. Okay, I see that our guest speaker, Owen, whose name is partly cut off, has joined us. Owen, can you unmute yourself?
I can, yes, and I apologize that I appear to you in the void, as it seems. I'm not used to 7 p.m. Zoom calls, so my lighting fixtures for typical working hours may not be doing enough. Let me see if I can get something. Oh, I could look like I'm telling a ghost story, but that's probably not going to be doing it. I'll try to just maybe I'll see if I can move to my desk and my battery will hold on. Give me one moment here. Apologies for the technical difficulties. All right, you're going to get up close and personal, but hopefully you can
okay.
at least see me now.
Yes.
Very good. Well, I've been listening to the conversation with great interest. There have been so many threads I would love to pull on. I used to live in Burlington, Vermont for about 10 years, and I'm very interested in everything that they're doing up there with their energy infrastructure, including all the things that Green Mountain Power is doing to try to advance on a lot of really interesting technologies, everything they're doing with battery storage and things like that. And then Janet, my mother, has been a League of Women Voters member for I don't know how long. So hearing you talk about that was very stirring to me, and excited to know that there are chapters out here doing some good work as well. And then, of course, as we're talking about this development here behind the prison, it sounds like, this is really why we're here tonight, to talk about the ways that there may be some facilitation that can be done through the utility, and hopefully some ways that we can help bring new solutions and new technologies, both to residents as well as to those developers who may be looking for ways to adopt electrification technology, but may have historically faced some hurdles in terms of doing that. So I'm here to talk very quickly. I used to live in New York City, so I do talk very quickly, but I will try to cover as much as I can in a short time, and then we'll leave some time open for questions as well. But I'm here to talk about our geothermal demonstration program. So I will do a quick screen share if that's acceptable. Before I do that, any questions or anything in particular you'd like me to touch on as I go through the program overview?
Carry
All right.
on.
Well, let's see if I cover any of the questions that may be burning in people's minds, and then we can always go back to different topics should they come up. So let me try this. Can you see a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I will go into screen. Can you still see a PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So just very quickly, I will talk about sort of our overall fossil-free vision. There's a whole document online that we can that I can point you to, and I'm sure Michael has shared in the past. But really, I think it's just interesting to take a look at this graphic on the right-hand side of the screen here, which shows the way that we see a lot of these systems being integrated in the future. And one thing I always like
Hey,
to point out,
Owen,
yes.
it looks like we're not seeing the presentation mode. We're only still seeing the edit mode of the presentation.
Okay, let me see. I'm seeing slideshow view, so I'm trying to figure out why you wouldn't be.
I think you have to share that window versus the other one,
Gotcha. Okay, let's see.
or just share the screen.
Maybe I'll do the share the screen. That way we won't have to monkey around with it. All right, so share entire screen. All right. Does that look a little better?
Looks
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. So this graphic on the right-hand side, you can see that there are a lot of systems that we see being integrated in the future. The red loop that I will point out about 2/3 of the way up the right-hand side of the document is an example of the network's geothermal concept that we're going to be talking about. The one thing that in sort of presenting this overall vision that I feel like we should have added a bit more explicitly is network geothermal is one way to do geothermal. I'm going to describe the differences between networked and non-networked geothermal in a second. And so I do feel like we should have had more data points or more little marks on here indicating that we do expect customers, individuals will go forward with using geothermal systems as well. At the very top right-hand corner of the image, you can see homes heating with electric heat pumps that are connected to that orange electric grid only. And it's entirely possible that a number of those homes might have geothermal systems. So I don't want it to come across that we are only thinking about network geothermal. We are just thinking about it as a part of the overall portfolio. And one thing that I think is also a useful just clarification is you see these 3 pie charts on the left-hand side of the slide, and a lot of people have sort of focused in on the teal color in our vision for fossil-free heating, which represents the use of renewable natural gas and green hydrogen. But really, I actually like to focus on the other 75% of it, which is all of the systems that we have in the yellow. 50% there of the building heating systems across Massachusetts and New York will be totally electrified, and then a remaining 25% will have a hybrided system, and that's really based off of if there's going to be other uses in the building or if there's not a technology available for them to fully electrify without a hybrid arrangement. But our goal is to take advantage of the extremely efficient systems that we get with vapor compression that are in both air source and ground source systems. So that really means that we see 75% of all building heating and cooling systems in Massachusetts and New York having a heat pump by the time we get to 2050. And I think that that's less of a departure from the 90% number that you see in the middle chart than it often comes across as you're sort of reading through the document. So I just like to make sure that we highlight that, especially as we talk about networked geothermal. And I think many of you are probably familiar with ground source heat pump systems, which we call geothermal for the sake of convenience. On the left-hand side, you have individual systems. This is the kind of thing that you might get if you call Dandelion or any of the other sort of residential geothermal installers, where they will drill a borehole on your property to feed a heat pump that is located in your building. That system will be designed for your needs, and everything will be self-contained. It will only impact you and also only benefit you. Conversely, we have a shared loop or district heating system, and you can see that represented on the right-hand side. And this is a topic that has been talked about by a number of parties. Heat has done a tremendous job advancing this concept in Massachusetts over the years, and we've worked very closely with Audrey and Zainab and have a lot of respect for everything that they're doing to really bring communities together and advance the thinking around this, especially given their focus on ensuring an equitable and just transition and really ensuring that the skilled labor force that has been built up over the years to support existing utility industries are able to bring those skills into the future and help us to install new types of assets that are going to support our customers' needs and desires. So here you can see there are boreholes in this graphic. They're installed in the public right-of-way, and then there are service lines running out to each of the buildings. It's also possible that you could install a large chunk of boreholes in a central field and have that serving a neighborhood in the same way, sort of like what we had in the previous graphic, where there's a little bit more of a loop. So that's the distinction between single site and networked geothermal. So the question may become, well, why would we do networked geothermal? It feels like there's additional complexity. Now we're relying on multiple different customers, and we're increasing the possibility somebody's, doing some yard work and they hit a line going to their house, and does that create challenges? Well, the reason is really, as we look at different buildings, they tend to have different load profiles. Makes sense. Some of us like the building very warm. Some of us are like my parents, who spent most of their adult lives living in a house built in 1868. So they kept the thermostat pretty low and put on the sweater when it got chilly outside, because the insulation was nothing more than shredded newspaper. So depending on the type of the building and the preference, you're going to end up with a different energy profile. This is something that we got from John Shavacco, who does a lot of work in New York, but also is consulting on the Eversource Network Geothermal Demonstration Program. And you can see here 4 different buildings with 4 different load profiles. And you can see that they're all pretty different. Zankel has a pretty large cooling load, so very dominant in the summertime, but not a lot of heating, whereas Sasselin has a significant heating load with much smaller cooling profile. The other 2, not only being smaller in scale, but are a little bit more balanced. The beautiful thing is, when we actually combine all 4 of these together, if we interconnect them, we end up with this ARTS quad load profile, which is in aggregate much more balanced. So you can see that in the table on the right-hand side here, it would have required a total of 136 loops, or vertical borehole loops, if you will, at a depth of 500 feet to serve each of the buildings individually. But by combining them together, by taking advantage of sort of the excess rejection of heat coming from Zankel and the excess need for heat coming from Sasselin, we can actually reduce that down to only 102 loops, meaning that that's a 25% reduction in the total footage, which also means therefore a reduction in the cost to install that system. So that's pretty exciting, and we think there are situations in which it will be beneficial to do a networked system rather than a non-network system. This all leads us to the demonstration program that we have ongoing right now. This was approved in docket 21-24 and was officially approved last December. It is a 5-year program with an approved budget of $15.6 million, with a goal of installing 4 systems that in total will be serving 100 to 200 customers. And that means about 20 to 40 heat pumps, or 100 to 200 tons per system. So you could think of this as being 20 to 40 residential homes. It could be one large central commercial building with a couple buildings around it. It could be several smaller commercial buildings. Overall, we're trying to understand the different types of systems and systems that we feel might be scalable going forward. There's been a lot of installation of network geothermal over the years at things like college campuses, where there's a single economic entity that controls the property as well as the capital investment of each of the buildings. So we're trying to figure out, can we work in the slightly messier arrangements? So just like we were describing, a private developer at an adult or assisted living facility, and then a neighboring parcel that's residential homes or something like that. Is there a way that we can integrate both the needs and the incentives, the desires of those individuals, so that we can try to take advantage of their shared energy resources? So we're going to be doing 4 installations over the course of a couple of years, collecting data and adding them to the overall sort of knowledge database around network geothermal. We, of course, are working very closely with Eversource on their program. They're installing a large system out in Framingham, I'm sure you're familiar with as well. And so we meet with them regularly to share best practices and to talk about ways that we think we can further support this solution being deployed to our customers. The DPU, in its approval of the program, said that there are 4 conditions that we must meet across all of our installations. So that is connecting facilities with diverse load profiles, seeking out sites where we can test network geothermal as an alternative to leak-prone pipe replacement, meaning putting in a network geothermal system and retiring the gas infrastructure that has been classified as leak prone. That way we could sort of right size the portion of the network where the network geothermal system went in. Looking at how network geothermal might be able to help us manage gas constraints. And then finally figuring out how we can support low income and environmental justice communities. And so we will be doing an installation of one of these systems in an area that is classified as low income and or environmental justice. Those are kind of the four main criteria. Not every project needs to meet all four criteria, but across the portfolio of installations, we need to ensure that we are exploring each of those conditions because we feel they're going to be critical to scaling up this offering as we go forward. I do want to highlight that participants in this program will have a monthly charge that they would pay. This would be in addition to their electric bill, and that would be, of course, dependent upon their usage. So this is, you can think of as sort of the fee for the infrastructure, if you will. And the reason that there is a fee at all is because the customers that participate in this program will receive the installation of the network geothermal system itself, as well as having the cost for their heat pump and any other sort of gas-fired appliances being covered. So ideally, if we went to 40 residential homes, we would pay for them to fully convert to electrified appliances, removing any sort of upfront cost friction as a hurdle to customer participation, and allowing them to take advantage of sort of all of that efficiency gain, which we think is exciting, but that does represent a pretty sizable investment for those individuals. And so there is a fee that comes along with that. This would be charged for 60 months. As you can see here, that participant fee at that time, which would coincide with the conclusion of the pilot, it would be up to the DPU to determine what a regulated service offering going forward might look like and how these rates might change. And at this point in time, we don't have any clarity around what the DPU is going to be thinking in 60 months. And we will continue to keep, of course, participants apprised of the situation as the project progresses. The last thing I'll touch on is just around geothermal learning objectives. So looking at the sort of things that we are hoping to understand as we go through this program, how and how much will the shared loops provide operational efficiencies? Can they satisfy the peak day needs for connected customers without backup heating and cooling? We believe the answer to that, of course, is yes, since geothermal is a well-proven technology, but we want to see under what conditions does it work? Under what conditions is there a drift condition risk? And then really, is it feasible to develop geothermal networks in lieu of leak-prone pipe, as we talked about being one of the conditions of the program? There are a number of questions that are sort of in the financial arena, and that goes to things like how much cost effectiveness or how much cost reduction would there be in a networked condition versus a non-networked condition for a given neighborhood? Is that beneficial? Does that sort of overwhelm and offset the complexity that I mentioned earlier? How do you think about building a system that you could then expand in the future? How does that change your system design? What are the minimum thresholds where it makes sense to interconnect others? Are there minimum thresholds? And then ultimately, how would this integrate into the existing utility space? Is this a new rate base? Is it a rate base that's combined with gas customers? And then there are a lot of questions the regulators and legislators are really going to have to answer, such as, will there be a point in time where customers are directed to make a change, right? And one service sort of is sunsetted in favor of another, and what would that look like? How would that be managed, and how would we ensure equity for all customers across that? So it's a pretty complex thing. We've had the gas and electric utilities for a long time, and a lot of work has been done to kind of make those mature industries, and now we're really sort of starting over, but we're coming into it with a lot of knowledge and hopefully a lot of best practices. So my sincere desire is that we're able to get this up and running pretty quickly, and that we're able to offer it to customers, because it is the most efficient heating and cooling solution that's out there. So I really think it's going to play a very important part as we seek to decarbonize our energy system here in Massachusetts and beyond. I think with that, I'll pause and maybe open it up for some questions.
So your example, had from New York, he had 4 with very different loads that were all larger than residential. And one of your criteria is a variety of load shapes. So so you're looking to have not all residential, perhaps all commercial, but all commercial or a mix of commercial and residential.
Yeah, so the DPU in fact told us, it was interesting if you followed both the Eversource filing and our filing, there's been a lot of directional comments in both of those dockets. Eversource had initially filed for 3 scenarios, a residential only scenario, a mixed use scenario, and then sort of a high density multifamily or high rise multifamily scenario. And they basically had kind of, $1 million for the residential only scenario, $1 million for the high rise multifamily, and then about $10 million in their budget for the mixed use one. So they were really focused in on that mixed use. And the DPU, in reviewing and approving their proposal, said, don't do the residential because that's already been done. So they felt like there wasn't a need to continue to explore that within the pilots. They said you can look to other projects that have already been installed and gather data from that. So similarly, they told us, don't do anything we told Eversource not to do, right? The fact that you're coming in a separate proposal doesn't mean that we want you to explore something that we already feel has been fully vetted.
So it does not cover single-use residential?
This program would not cover a proposal that was exclusively single-use residential unless there were conditions around it that made it unique. And ultimately, it would come down to the DPU's decision to review and approve that. So let's say there was a unique situation where it was a planned neighborhood that had leak-prone pipe in it and was in an area of gas constraints, and it was an environmental justice or low-income community. And we said, we think there's something to be explored here because they're planning a wholesale, replacement of all of the mechanical systems or something to that effect. Then it's possible that they would consider it. But I think if we just said, here are 20 homes and they're just sort of 20 typical homes, it's likely that they would say we don't feel that needs additional exploration.
I see Matt has his hand up.
And I apologize, I'm still screen sharing, so I can't see all of you. If you'd like me to, if it's okay if I pause, I might be more responsive.
Sure, I think that would make sense. So this sounds like a very exciting project, I think also for National Grid. I mean, if you look at the core competencies of National Grid, it's operating utility scale infrastructure that's in the public right of way, so you already know how to go get those permits and throw things in there and pave over them and all of that stuff. And I think it really marks the next level of commercialization, where it's been kind of a house by house or building by building or project by project. And, it makes a whole lot more sense to operate on a utility scale, not just for the balancing of load, although, you can certainly increase efficiency that way, but just simply for financing the capital and investment and, billing and all of the conveniences here that I think even the pilot program illustrates. So I think it's potentially groundbreaking, so to speak, for National Grid as well, a project like this, presuming it's successful. I was thinking about what reasonable or potential site in Concord might be for such a thing. And in fact, if I could share for a second, when I look at the criteria, if you look at this area along Stowe Street, that it goes from the library down here past the Emerson Umbrella Arts Center. This is a mixed affordable housing condominium site. This is the Hunt Recreation Center. This is affordable housing, public housing. And so is this development here, is public housing. And then at the end here of the street is the Arsenal building run by the National Guard. So if you think about that, plus there's a smattering of houses down this street, that's about 25 properties with one street that could be connecting all of them, that includes the affordable housing component, as well as a very mixed set of uses, and where a lot of the facilities are either directly owned by or managed by the town, so that there's a relative ease of getting a critical mass of subscription for both the residential as well as the public facilities. So it's just something to consider. Again, I imagine that Concord is not necessarily the like kind of a target town for this kind of a program, but I think what we do have to offer is a lot of will, and interest that could be done. And in fact, we were talking just earlier today, there's a RFP out to replace a boiler at Alcott School, and they've been talking about heat pump units and other things. And Alcott School is right here, again, right at the end of Stowe Street. So this one section of 3 blocks could potentially connect up all of that. So anyway, just some food for thought. I don't know about the kind of leak prone aspect. I know that there's this ongoing program by National Grid to pinpoint the kind of infrastructure. I just don't have the GIS map that shows me where those things are.
Yeah, and you hit on a really good point, Matt, that I should have explained a bit further. So as it relates to the leak-prone pipe, the presence of it and or the gas constraint, obviously that's something we would help potential applicants to evaluate, right? So we're not expecting you to have that information or to know that. So really what we are looking for is interested, committed, potential applicants, right? Like, and you describe Concord as having a lot of interest or a lot of will to make something happen. And I find that to actually be a surprisingly rare commodity these days, because it's amazing how many folks, even if you offer them a relatively free or fully free system, are sort of, well, we just did this a couple of years ago. It's still got legs, like that sort of thing comes up. And, I can understand that, but at the same time, a sunk cost shouldn't necessarily mean that one overlooks an exciting opportunity, and therefore this hopefully will be a program where we are able to find some folks that are excited about taking advantage of it. I think that street you're mentioning looks very interesting, and what I will commit to doing is I can share with Michael the application that we have for this program. I hesitate to use the word application. It's really more of sort of an information gathering form, because obviously there's going to need to be a bit of massaging of the proposals once it comes in, because we have to make sure that we understand the size of the buildings, how many tons are you talking about? We don't want it to be that we're completely mismatched. Like, I think all of the buildings you just mentioned are probably several hundred, if not 1,000 tons, which is obviously going to be beyond what we would likely be able to do as one of the installations.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I'm ballparking here, but I think there could be a subset of that could be very interesting, and certainly you could design it with an eye towards what could phase 2 look like, assuming that this is something that catches on and there's an ability to do more of it in the future. So, and I could be totally wrong about that. As we talk nameplate information and other things, we may discover that it's a better fit than I'm thinking. But that's where I can share that form. You can fill out any information you have, any areas that you think are kind of interest, and then we can continue the conversation and see if that is a good fit.
Yeah, and I just pointed that out as a for instance.
Of course,
yeah. It's just
that. And
then really when you talk about the cost per heat pump, are you talking about like a 12,000 BTU head unit, that kind of thing, per
we were talking
one
about,
of those?
We were talking about per 5-ton heat pump. So basically what we were trying to avoid was, a commercial customer who requires 100-ton system paying the same thing as an individual residential customer. And this is, again, I mentioned sort of the fact that we're in a brave new world here in terms of kind of regulation and all of that, because there isn't even a consensus around how this sort of service should be billed. even if we were to start doing all of them tomorrow, right? Like if we got the green light to say, go do as many of these as you can, well, do you bill it on a sort of flat rate because you're saying the electric rate is going to vary with usage and therefore you're getting kind of a stabilizing element of just depreciating the asset over its useful life? Or do you do it based off of BTU metering, and then you have to figure out how you do the BTU metering and how you integrate that into your data systems and explain it to customers and make it so that it fits into the existing bills. And then you have to think about, well, do you do net metering? So if you have a customer that is rejecting heat during the wintertime, should they actually receive a benefit for that? And then how do you ensure that in doing all of that, you're still netting out to what is a reasonable cost for customers, but B, something where you haven't effectively made it so that you take all the money from over here from this set of customers and you give it to that set of customers, and then there's no sort of paying down on the assets. So it's just, we're still trying to figure all of this out, and of course do so in a way that minimizes the cost, because again, as Pamela was mentioning earlier, I mean, these systems are incredibly efficient to operate. That's why we're so excited about them. They have the smallest possible peak impact on the electric grid as well, which is important because as we think about putting more and more things on the electric grid, we want to ensure we don't create an issue for the electric grid operator, whether that be National Grid or another entity. And so there's a lot of good things here. We just want to make sure that we're sort of being thoughtful before we hit the gas pedal and start to install a whole bunch of these and then realize that there's some foundational flaw, like we didn't put out BTU meters if that would have been a preferable way to do it.
How many tons of capacity is your kind of par for a residential home?
It depends, but
I understand.
Yeah, no, of course. And I was going to say it depends, but in general, we say 4 or 5 tons is pretty typical. It depends not only on the square footage, but also the climate region. And Sharon's waving, so she might have some thoughts on this as well.
Mine is 3 or 4. I have geothermal.
Okay. So it's very cost effective, very this pricing.
Looks like a bargain. Yeah.
A bargain. Yeah.
Right. We calculated out, like I think I was saying during the presentation, to be potentially up to $70,000 to $90,000 worth of investment for participants in the program. If you imagine a residential customer, because it would be a geothermal system, a heat pump, hot water heater, hopefully an induction stove. I'd really love to get some induction ranges out there so that people could start to experience them, and we could get some testimonials from people who say they actually work. I actually use them. It's great. My cat can walk on the surface and it doesn't, hurt its paws or anything. And then also, trying to think about what we can do on the energy efficiency side as well. So what we don't want to do is put in all of this great new equipment in a home that's incredibly leaky, like the one my parents were living in, right? And then have it be a bad outcome for customers because all of a sudden they're running the system that's, struggling to keep up because of the thermal envelope and having all of these challenges. So the goal would be to find some folks where we can say, it's like the Extreme Makeover Home Edition, and we're gonna really kind of come in and make a wholesale change in the mechanical systems of the home, and hopefully leave the customers in a really good condition when we're all done.
Yeah, it's like Mass Save Plus.
Exactly.
It seems
Michael?
like it would be a lot
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, Michael had his hand up.
Go ahead.
Olin, you may have answered my question, and I'm sure the devil is in the details, but is the ultimate goal, or would one of the requirements be that all heating, even in the coldest of days, be serviced by geothermal, or is there some commitment to maintaining backup fuel and keeping the boilers? Is there an intention to remove all the gas piping in the neighborhood? Again, I'm sure it's all in the details, but just curious what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking of the cleanest way to articulate this. My intention, my goal is to design the geothermal system such that it can provide all 100% of the heating and cooling needs of the home. That can typically be done But I studied engineering as an undergraduate, and as you know, if you tell any good engineer, bring me the moon, they'll say, give me enough time and money and I can do it for you, right? So I want to make sure that in doing a design for that customer, that it is going to work for them, and that that we feel it will be practical and feasible. It is clear from the experience we've had with geothermal installations at the residential level that they can function without a backup system. So I don't think the technology is really the X factor here. What I will say is individuals may have preferences. Individuals may wish to retain a backup system, and if we have a really excited community and there's one customer who says, I had a bad experience with electric baseboard heating in the 70s, and I'm worried about that. I want to keep the gas system for whatever reason. That's something we would probably address on a case-by-case basis. But ideally, we would find situations in which we could replace the heating system and remove the existing heating system. There's a slightly separate question around removing the gas piping, because as all of you are well aware, we can't revoke service from any customer who is in good standing as part of our role as a regulated utility in the state. And so if a customer says, yeah, I'm happy to sign up for your geothermal program, replace my water heater, replace my, do the induction range, right? Sounds great. But I really want to keep my gas fireplace. I can't cut their gas line, right? Like that's not something that we do. And that's not something that we would be allowed to do by the regulators. So that's a slightly more complicated situation. I think it would be great if we could identify an area of the system where it was like on that first page in my presentation, sort of a nice islanded community that we said, yeah, we switched everything out in here and we were able to cut the gas line, and perfect, right? Like the gas line stops here, right? You could imagine the sign out in the front yard or something like that. But it's not necessarily clear that we're going to identify that site exactly. And so we're trying to be flexible as we work through this, because we do recognize that this is ultimately a human transition as much as a technological transition. And so we want to meet customers and individuals where they are on all of this. And if I can get a customer who is open to some technologies and maybe a little bit more resistant on others, to come 60% of the way or 80% of the way, that to me is still a great outcome, even if we have to work a little bit more on that fireplace and see what that might look like. And there may be other options as well. It's possible that down the road they put in a propane tank instead of the natural gas line. And my parents, who I mentioned, moved to a newly built home about 10 years ago. And my father is getting a geothermal system installed actually this year because of all the conversations I've had with him. And so the first thing I asked him was, well, you have a gas stove in the kitchen. Are you keeping it? Right. And he was going back and forth on it and trying to think about what that meant for him. So it's certainly something I think each individual is going to have to consider for themselves. And, we will try to find a program site that tests the most things it can, including what happens and how satisfied our customers when they switch off of what they have today onto something fully new, and does that work for them in the long run.
Great, thanks, Ellen. And I'm not trying to be rude, but I just got disconnected from the meeting because I think my computer is having difficulty with the video camera and the audio at the same time. So I paused for a few seconds and came right back in. You hadn't skipped a beat. I just want to let you know that.
Well, perhaps I hadn't noticed you were not there either, Michael. So maybe that's a bit of a criticism towards me. I don't know, but.
So how many tons of capacity can you put in the right of way per 100 linear feet?
So I would actually point you to the Burrow-Happold study that HEAT had produced a number of years ago, where they looked at what they called representative street segments. And there was an interesting, I can try to pull it up. Yes.
Yeah. Could you give us specifics on how to look that up?
Yes, of course. Let me see.
Might be able to, I don't know if we can't put something in the chat. Okay.
No, but
Available.
let me see if I can get to it.
You
Sorry.
can put it on, if you can put it on the screen, we'll have it.
Yep. Give me 1 second here.
There's also a whiteboard feature. I've never even tried that before.
Getting fancy here. I never used Zoom, so this is all new to me.
Yeah, I don't know if this does anything. This is new to me too.
Well, Matt, we're viewing your screen and it's all white.
Okay, sorry. Let me
You're
close.
doodling.
No, oh gosh, well, I wasn't even trying to doodle, so that shows what we're talking about here. Now, how can I close the whiteboard? Sorry.
So I have a couple of questions, Owen.
Yes.
So is there an expectation that in the future National Grid would be offering geothermal to individual homeowners?
It's an interesting question, and I apologize if my eyes are flicking around. I'm just trying to get to this study while I'm talking here. So we do not necessarily believe, as I mentioned at the beginning, that networking is always going to be the best option. So if you have, for instance, 10 residential homes, they're right next to each other, they're all sort of similar size, you don't have any particular unique characteristics to any of them, then it's sort of, I described the geothermal system, Sharon, as you're going to be well familiar with, as being like a bank account, right? You want to have some degree of heat rejection, so cooling, and then some degree of heat withdrawal, which is the heating in the wintertime. And if those two numbers are about equal, your balance stays about zero. If you end up having too much of one or the other, it starts to slowly drift over time. You start to get in debt, or let's say build savings, because that's a happier way to think of this analogy here. So if you have 10 individual customers, then you're sort of just amplifying the existing usage profiles without necessarily having much benefit to the interconnection of them from an operational standpoint. So it may very well be that putting in an individual system is going to be easier, maybe cheaper, maybe better than networking all of the facilities. And so we don't want to create a situation where that's not a possibility. And that's something I've been very clear about with customers, or with our regulators as well, is that I don't think having an exclusive right to geothermal where everything has to be networked is the most efficient way for this market to develop.
So it sounds like, so you're not planning to offer networked geothermal to individual residents, but would you just go do like, oh, I want geothermal, not as a network, just become a geothermal installer?
So I think that could be nice. I mean, I love the idea of the simplicity, to Matt's point, right? About, you move into a house, you call your cable provider, you call your, the electric provider, you call the geothermal provider, and all of those are just kind of taken care of for you. I think what you would find is that the regulators potentially would have some questions about that, because really regulated utilities exist to install public assets that are connected to multiple folks, that share liability. There's a large, like, it's not really the same thing as I go to your home and I do one thing for you. So I think there would be an openness on our side to serving in that role. But I think, again, that's one of those larger regulatory questions that we'll
but you could build the geothermal network that has the interconnect that just stops at the boundary of the house, just like any other utility, and then all the stuff that's in the house is owned by the homeowner. And
and that's our vision, right? So anywhere we were doing network geothermal, we wouldn't be looking to
type of
own
utility.
the equipment.
The next generation.
So the question is, and actually one of the things that, Matt, you kind of touched on here as well, is there are some benefits to a utility offering geothermal, even if it's not operationally beneficial. So even if everybody has the same load profile and it doesn't necessarily create some beautiful nonetheless, we might be able to put it in more quickly. There might be more space available because we can do it in the right of way. We might be able to even put it in. We talked about putting it in on the national grid pipe yards, right? We have these open spaces where we're storing transformers and pipes and all sorts of things. And it's just a parcel of land. And there's a tremendous amount of thermal capacity below that land. Why wouldn't we just do it there? Or, you know, I used to live in Brooklyn, as I mentioned. Prospect Park is this incredible open space that's there. Couldn't that be a thermal battery for the community that's surrounded it? In the same way that the surface of the park has enriched that community, actually the subsurface of the park could serve as a resource as well. So I think there are a lot of things like that. And then one of the other main things, especially as it relates to low-income customers, is low-income customer calls up for a utility service. It's not like they have to pay out of pocket or secure financing to have a gas line run to their home. In the same way, if we were offering geothermal, they wouldn't be required to do that. It wouldn't have to be personal financing. It could be something that they paid for in their rates over time. And then they have that protection, right? It's a regulated relationship as opposed to, you know, being subject to whatever sort of lender might be willing to offer them financing. And is that above the board or not, and you know, all of those kind of things that I think can be complicated. So I think there are reasons we could do it. We're very open to exploring how we can help support the technology is probably the takeaway.
I have another question, and you mentioned,
Sure.
I'm going to share something. You mentioned that a variety of load profiles, hopefully to balance, and I can imagine how, you know, you could have industrial customers that want cooling, a lot more cooling. Might be harder in the summer to find people that want heat. But I was a little surprised to find, this is an article from the, I think, May ASHRAE Journal, where they did a residence hall at Bishop's College in Montreal. And what I found really interesting here is they were concerned about mitigating the risk of energy imbalance between what's extracted in the winter and what's rejected in the summer. Is that, do you see that as something to worry? Worry is not quite the right word, but to design around? What's the thinking on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, you know, a core tenet of utility service is safe and reliable. And so we need to ensure that if we're putting in this system, that it is prepared for use today and that it's controllable for use in the future as well. And again, I'll go back to HEAT and the great work that they've done, where they've put forward this study. They actually talk about the idea of having sort of central conditioning facilities connected to this loop. So when you get above a certain connected tonnage, you're going to have a pumping facility anyway, just to circulate the fluid through the system. And so they say in their write-up, which I'll share in a second here, well, you could also have a small electric boiler or even a heat pump hot water heater at that connected the little pumping facility, and that could add some BTUs over time if the system started to get a little too cold. Or you could have a cooling tower that could extract some BTUs if the system started to get a little too hot. So there are ways that once everybody's connected to this fluid, that we can just work with the fluid and create a system that then is benefiting all of the customers. And so what I imagine would happen over time is that we would have a engineered sort of delivery temperature for an ambient water loop. And we would ensure that we kept that temperature. And then everyone that was, to Matt's point, putting the equipment in the home, right, at the demarcation line between the sort of utility infrastructure and the homeowner's equipment, would know to design it around that entering water temperature. And it would be our requirement to figure out how to do that. And so we're looking at both sort of those centralized facilities. I'm involved with some feasibility studies where we're exploring wastewater heat recovery. So looking at large infrastructure where you can pull some heat out of the wastewater. There's discussion around solar thermal, putting up some solar panels over parking lots and turning those into thermal resources. I mean, there's a lot of very interesting stuff that is happening out there. And it's sort of, I don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I'd like us to just get some more of these systems out there and show that it's working so that then we can accelerate the sort of basic deployment and then continue to improve as we go. But it's certainly something that we're considering and something we would want in the design of these pilots to ensure that we had the appropriate infrastructure in place to protect against that drift.
I have one other unrelated question.
Sure.
You mentioned one of the 4 criteria is gas constraints. Are there any, as managing gas constraints, are there any gas constraints in the town of Concord that?
I would have to check on that. I admit, though I studied engineering as an undergrad, I'm not in the engineering group here at National Grid, and so I would have to get more specific data for Concord before I could speak to that. But again, that's where if I see this as a two-way conversation around potential pilots. So we might come back and say, hey, we're kind of interested in this area in the town, and looking at the map, it seems like there could be some good things. That's one way, and then you could see how that feels to you, and then vice versa. You know, you could come back to us and say, hey, Stowe Street seems exciting, so can we talk about what might work there?
So as far as the leak-prone pipe and the gas and constraints, you could get back to us on that information?
Yeah, I don't want to say that the engineers will have a map and say here's where there's leak-prone pipe, or here's where there's a gas constraint, because there are rules around the information that can be released. But if there is an area that we would say is operationally of interest in the town, we would try to share that with you so that you could factor that into your sort of feasibility review.
Jerry has his hand up.
Yeah, just very briefly, what's the time frame for you to pick your test sites and then implement this?
Yep, great question, Jerry. So the first site is going to be selected in the coming months, is probably the way I'll say it. And the reason there's a bit of vagary about that is because we filed an implementation plan and a customer agreement with the DPU back in May, I think it was. And we saw that in the Eversource proceeding around their program, it took them about 8 months for the DPU to review and approve that filing, their sort of analogous filing, if you will. So using that same timeline for us, that puts us December, January timeline before we get something back from the DPU. Obviously, if there are any modifications to that filing, we would then need to go back to the customers that are interested to say, here's the new customer agreement, the new implementation plan, and let's make sure that you're clear on and comfortable with any changes that may have been made. So we would then be hoping to make a decision in relatively short order, and we've committed to the DPU that after they review and approve, we will make a decision within 60 days for the first of the 4 sites. The goal would then be, if possible, to do some of the construction, if not all, in calendar year 23, so next year. And again, this is all for the first site. And then we would have that site hopefully up and running by either early spring or certainly by summer of 2024. So in parallel, we would have been reviewing and selecting some of the other sites, and we would try to be as aggressive as we could around the installation of those systems. Obviously, this is a new thing for us, so we don't want to bite off more than we can chew and end up with a product that would not be serviceable or that wouldn't be high quality for customers. But since we are outsourcing the work, given that this is largely new, though we will be, we've already spoken to our unions about trying to create learning opportunities for them in terms of bringing some of those core competencies into this new space. We would be able to do a bit more than perhaps we otherwise could, because we could potentially be managing 3 different contractor relationships for 3 simultaneous project installations in either 2023 or I'm sorry, 2024 probably, or potentially one lingering over into 2025.
Great, that's actually a little faster than I would have imagined. So that sounds really interesting to me.
We're trying to go quickly. We're just trying not to get ahead of either the regulators or the customers, right? Because obviously, as we're installing these systems, people have capital plans, they have other constraints. New buildings are getting built, and it doesn't work to do something now, but it could work in 2 years. So there's a bit of flexibility that we're trying to sort of plan for and do what we can to find a workable solution.
Yeah, I would think that I won't say that there might be issues, but that within a particular neighborhood or area, you know, not everyone's going to sign up at the same rate or at the same time.
Right.
And that could potentially drag out. But
Yeah.
you're closer to that than I am. So I'm sure you know about all that.
So I
Michael's-
will, sorry, go ahead, Sharon.
Michael has his hand up. Michael?
Yeah. There we go. Jerry, I think you could probably use the word issue and be safe there. I'm sure there will be a few that come up.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things as we have 9 minutes left in the meeting. So Owen is, National Grid is approaching the electrification from a couple of angles. One of them is what Owen is doing on this large sort of connected scale. And then the energy efficiency side, I think, just to trying to answer your question, Sharon, there are incentives that are offered for heat pumps.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if
Right.
yeah, I mean, we know that, right? So,
Right.
and I think it's for commercial, it's per ton, and for residential, it's something like $10,000. I can't remember, but just want to keep that in mind. From an energy efficiency standpoint, we can offer the incentives. What Owen is looking at is more of the, you know, the large interconnected grid.
Yeah.
So Owen, just very quickly then, it sounds like this is really interesting. I'm glad you had a chance to come on. Is in your mind, what would the next steps be? Would Concord have to indicate some interest to you, and then you might have a set of preliminary requirements that you'd be looking for, or I mean, it sounds like there's some interest in this. It's a nice initial conversation, but there are probably many to come. What would you advise at this point if there's some initial interest anyway?
Yeah, so I will send over that form, or perhaps more accurately, Michael, I'll send you the form and then you can send the form over because you'll have all the email addresses. But that is the best next step, I would say, because that sort of documents, if you will, your interest and gets us to the point where we have a little bit more information than we do coming out of this call. It's great to hear the one potential area, but then I think it just gives us a bit more to be getting on with. And we have some technical resources that we've contracted with for this project. And so what we're doing is we're going through each of these site proposals and having them take a look at it. And then they're going to be ranking them effectively and determining the feasibility. We had, when we filed with the DPU, the customer agreement, we also put in a matrix for site selection. So that's all part of that same DPU filing, and that's all publicly available if you'd like to take a look. And it basically just says, here are the criteria that we're going to use. We had HEAT take a look at that. We had the Attorney's General Office take a look at that before we filed it, because we wanted to ensure that we were being transparent and thoughtful in this process. And the goal really is, if we end up with 20 sites that are interested, we would put them all through the same matrix, and then that would spit out a sort of rank order, if you will. And we would start with the first one, and if they decided they didn't actually want to sign on the dotted line, we'd go to the second, we go to the third, we go to the fourth, and that way we ensure that the process is straightforward, and it doesn't feel like we're putting our thumb on the scale in any way, and instead we're able to kind of formalize the goals of the program through the use of that matrix and process.
Matt?
Well, I was just thinking a little bit more about this network proposal. And one of the things that's intriguing is that, as opposed to gas or electric infrastructure, where the public right-of-way is the means of transmission, in the case of geothermal, it's the means of production. And I don't know if municipalities in the future will say, well, they kind of have an interest, you know, in that it's their land that's producing the power.
Right.
It's an interesting thought. I don't know if it's come up before, but it's intriguing.
It hasn't come up but it's coming up now. So actually, it's an incredibly timely comment, and I'm having some conversations. It's almost like you have a microphone in my office, Matt, which I welcome your thoughts on the calls here. But no, it is an interesting premise, because if you think about mineral rights, we handle mineral rights in this country in a very different way than many other countries do, and this isn't mineral rights in quite the same way, because it's not an extractable, consumable resource. It's something that you're literally taking advantage of space, and it's really solar energy that is stored in the earth, right? It's a combination of solar energy and natural sort of radiative energy coming up from different parts of the earth as well. So there's some different things to think about in terms of how we manage this. And then it also creates an interesting idea of like, well, if somebody is willing to host all of the boreholes, how should they be compensated, right? Obviously, they're creating a benefit, So if the Alcott school says, "Hey, tear up our whole field and put in the boreholes to serve the whole community," well, there should be some benefit that goes to Alcott school because they're hosting this resource. So, one of the other things that is coming up is that more like a power plant in kind of using the current language, and so utilities can't own power plants. We've been separated for a long time. We just distribute the power. So should we also not own the boreholes? But then does that create a friction, and does that create, a slowdown as we're waiting for those to build out? And there's just some really interesting, as a policy wonk, there's some really interesting questions that are going on right now. And then of course, there's also the question of, if Alcott School says, we want to earn X amount of dollars for owning and hosting this system, do they care about the ownership of it, or do they care about the revenue from it? And are there two different ways to think about that, right? Like, so for speed, for expediency, can the utility be the one that actually pays the dollars, puts the asset in, and holds it on its balance sheet? But then there's a payment to the school in lieu, in understanding and recognition of the service that they're providing? Or does it have to be that the school owns it in order for them to be the ones that are monetizing it, right? And my
It
thought
might be
would
like a cell tower, maybe.
right. It's, again, there are multiple different ways this can be approached, and we're excited to kind of figure all of that out. We just want to make sure that we're again trying to get things rolling, because I think it's easy to get almost paralyzed thinking about all of the possible permutations. And I know that's something that I struggle with, because I love to think about the optimal solution. The size of the spreadsheets I've built thinking about this challenge would boggle all but perhaps the most committed engineering mind or technical mind. And it's not always useful, right? Like, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're getting these things out there and that we're serving customers with them, because ultimately that's what we're here for.
Hey, so just a quick 30-second side note on that. There's a facility out in Denver that is using Denver wastewater to heat and cool. They're a 1 million square foot facility, and the developer has claimed rights to the BTUs coming off of the sewer water. So, and they've used the mineral rights protocol or paradigm, if you will, to do that. So it has been thought about, not for geothermal, but at least on the wastewater heat recovery side, they are going there. It's very interesting.
Right. Yeah. And it gets even more interesting, or maybe not more interesting, but it gets differently interesting if you start to think about a resource like that might mean you put in fewer boreholes. So it's one thing to say the school is going to host the boreholes, and it's literally just the same number of boreholes, but one person agrees to have them on their property versus having them in the right of way or something like that. If you have a rich energy resource like wastewater, now maybe you put in fewer boreholes. So if the net cost of that system is lower because you've put in fewer boreholes thanks to this resource, then all of a sudden the economics get more beneficial for the customers. But should the resource be compensated based off of sort of a fixed BTU rate or off of a saved energy rate? I mean, there's very quickly becomes quite complicated. I know we're at time. I get very excited about all of this, so apologies for eating up the whole second hour of the meeting here. Two things I will just say very quickly. I couldn't share the Borough Happold study from HEAT. I'll send a link to Michael as well, so when he's sending around that information form, he can share that with you. And the other thing was just on the IRA. I know that there are a lot of people that are trying to kind of figure out what that means, and we're still working through it on our end as well, because there's a lot of things that are changing. There is a website called Rewiring America that has an interesting little calculator on it where you can put in your zip code, your home, your square footage, that kind of things. And they talk about some of the incentives that may become available for that. So I'm not vouching for necessarily the accuracy of the calculations, but they've at least tried to identify some of the categories, and that may be helpful as a resource to share with individuals.
Thank you for that. Matt, can I take it by your involvement that you're interested in looking into this further? And
Well, it's certainly very intriguing. Yeah.
so Michael will forward it to at least both of us.
Yeah, and I mean,
Might as well send it to all of
especially
us.
since the select board regulates the right of way, so we do the grant of location permits. That's one of the aspects that is relevant here. So.
Well, we're at time. We do have, I did have public comments. I want to offer Cheryl an opportunity to introduce herself and tell us why she came tonight. You have to unmute first.
So Cheryl Bagan, I live at 3 Bolton Street, which is in the White Pond area. I've been on the White Pond Advisory Committee for the last several years. Jerry recognized me. So I'm interested in, Sharon and I chatted outside on the street, which is where I do most of my conversations, and talked about this committee looking for people. I'm about ready to roll off the White Pond Advisory Committee. So I'm certainly interested in working with the town in some other capacity. Lawyer by training, I now teach high school biology, science background, and that's sort of my background. I'm fascinated. I heard about, I know that Brookline has been working on this, and I don't know where it is now, but I know they had a bunch of gas line that needed repair, and they've really been looking at, rather than spending the money on gas lines, is using hydrothermal and sort of doing a networking. I don't know where it stands now, but I know that that's been something they've been talking about for a couple of years.
That's because you teach in Brookline, that you're aware of that?
No, it's on NPR. Everything I get is from NPR. It's not on NPR. I have no knowledge about it. Yeah, I mean, I've taught environmental science. I mean, I've taught a bunch of, classes like that. So as I do more teaching, I learn more stuff, really.
Okay. I see Pamela has her hand. Can you keep it short?
Yeah, really brief. First Parish in Concord, which includes the Wright Tavern and a whole bunch of houses there, is already looking into, under their Greening the Parish, they're looking into geothermal heat pump. So maybe that would be an opportunity.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Yep. Well, and Michael is going to be talking to them, so that will be a perfect segue. Any other final comments? Like entertain a motion to adjourn?
I want to say that was a fascinating talk from Owen. Thank you very much.
Oh, yes, thank you, Owen. It
Go
was
on.
more fascinating than I anticipated. I think you never finished your presentation. We stopped for comments and we took over.
Well, that I prefer to spend more time on questions, because I've heard myself give a presentation quite a bit, and it's much more interesting to talk to all you folks. And I think we covered a lot of great ground. So really excited to continue the conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Make a motion for adjournment.
You can actually just adjourn the meeting as chair.
Okay,
You
all
don't
right.
need a motion. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. All right, then we'll adjourn. Any further comments? All right, hearing none, we'll adjourn at 8:05. Thank you, Matt. I wasn't aware of that.
Right. Sure. Bye.
Okay,
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Right.